Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, October 2nd, 2013, middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to pow on a Friday. And what we would like to be a relaxing weekend, but of course these are hardly relaxing times that we are all going through right now. I was sharing with a much younger friend just yesterday that they are having the misfortune of living through one of the worst periods of American history, and they don't see it because it's all they've ever known. As they grew up out of childhood into adulthood, this is just sort of the way things have always been. And said about elucidating that no, this nation used to be a lot freer, a lot wealthier for the ordinary population, better infrastructure, leading manufacturer, and this is not the nation that it was just a short time ago. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike Nash of Privacy Case will be joining us in our third hour today. I invited him back on the show to ask him about recent reports about additional processors and 3G chips in some of our personal electronic devices. So we're going to be talking with him about that. Claire, of course, will be joining us this Friday, coming back tomorrow, rather Thursday, October 10th. Kevin Barrett will be on the show talking about his new book. Now, obviously, this is day 2 of the government shutdown, and you know, shut happens. It's not the first time it's happened. The world didn't end. But one thing I've noticed already is that daily flood of emails I was getting about chemtrails and Planet X and how there was no plane at the Pentagon, HAARP, UFOs, and Bigfoot and Elvis Love Child, they've all stopped. Like a switch was thrown. Just they're not there anymore. See, this is not entirely a bad thing for the government to shut down. Now, Obama has now summoned the leaders of Congress up to the White House to lay down the law as to where he's going to go. Now, of course, there's one of three ways for them to go. Either the House and Senate simply raise the debt ceiling with no conditions, or the Senate agrees with the House to defund Obamacare. That's not going to happen. Or the third course, and the one they really ought to be taking, all things considered, is to delay Obamacare for 1 year. And that makes a lot of sense with all the reports we're getting about just problems with the system all over the place. But Obama's really listening to his ego on this one. You know, this is his pet project. This is his legacy. It's got his name on it. And he wants it to go forward. And he wants it to be seen as great, even if it's just total crud. And I was looking at some of the spin coming out of the White House, trying to bolster this obvious disaster up. And it reminds me a lot of a terrible tragedy that happened in the former Soviet Union called Lysenkoism. And it was this charlatan, phony scientist, about as phony as Al Gore in global warming, claimed that he could trick winter wheat into early germination by cooling it, and more importantly, the next generation wheat would just germinate all by itself. And Stalin grabbed this guy and praised. He was trying to outdo the scientific achievements of the Soviet Union under Lenin and forced everybody to go along with this. And it led to massive famine in the Soviet Union because the theory was completely junk, just like the theory of human-caused global warming. And it was all driven by ego and vanity, and I think that's what's going on here. But again, and I'm going to keep hammering this question because people need to get this out there. The one question nobody in government is talking about, the one question nobody in the corporate media is talking about, is why the federal government, which has the legal authority to create and issue interest-free money under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, why are they going to a privately owned bank to borrow that currency at interest? Because the Federal Reserve just prints it up out of thin air. They even use the same printing presses the U.S. government would use. The Federal Reserve doesn't have its own printing presses. It hires the U.S. Treasury Department to make that currency, or they just type it into a computer. Well, if the Federal Reserve can do that, so can the government. Does it make any sense that a government with the legal authority to create and issue interest-free currency for the use of the people would go to a privately owned central bank and borrow currency at interest, thereby enslaving future generations of Americans to those bankers? And the federal government doesn't want anybody asking that question because they don't have a good answer. Why they did such a stupid thing. We know why they did such a stupid thing. They got bribed back in 1913. The bankers bribed Congress. They bribed the president, Woodrow Wilson, and he wrote in his own diary, "I've destroyed my own country." He knew he had done wrong. And that's the question all of you need to be asking yourselves, and everybody you know. We need this to go out viral. Put it on all your social media, your email list, all of it. Why is this government even worried about increasing the debt ceiling to go to a private bank to borrow currency when the government has the legal authority to issue its own interest-free money? It doesn't make any sense, and they don't really have a good explanation for it. All right, we're going to grab a quick phone call here. Dan in Philadelphia. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great.
I feel like I've reached a whole new level of disgust this morning with what's going on with this administration when they...
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when these vets, they called this morning to get permission to go into the memorial, and they were not only rejected, but they were threatened with arrest.
Yeah, isn't that weird that they don't have money to keep the memorials open, but they've got money to hire police to threaten to arrest anybody who walks in? There's fiscal responsibility for you.
And that's what gets me so insane, is that they go out of their way to make this type of stuff happen. But I just wonder if what's happening in the last 2 days is finally going to wake anybody up who is still asleep, because it's almost like...
Probably both of them.
How could you ignore World War II veterans being threatened with arrest at their own memorials? Now, granted, they got access today, which was fantastic. They went right in again, and obviously they didn't get arrested, thank God. But it's so mind-boggling with everything else that's going on, like you talk about with the Federal Reserve.
Now they're going to go over. Now they're going to go over to the Lincoln Memorial, and they should. I mean, let's be honest.
They should go to every one of them.
The fountains are shut off. They can shut off the lighting, but that's the only thing it costs to have those memorials there. They're just big piles of rock. And, you know, certainly these veterans are not going to do anything to deface or vandalize these monuments, these icons to the nation they thought they were fighting for. It doesn't really cost all that much for these monuments to be open. It's just one of the things the government is doing to try and say, booga, booga, booga. You know, if you want all those things that you want to have from us, the government, you're going to have to go back to accepting those things you don't want, like NSA spying, TSA crotch groping and smashing laptops and stealing your iPads and all the rest of that stuff. And it's extortion against the American people. They've taken all of our wealth and property, and they'll give us back a little tiny bit of it as long as we obey what they want us to do. That's the way this system is working right now.
You know, and he's still going on his vacation. Supposedly they're not canceling his trip this weekend.
Of course not. Well, he's heading for this huge trip to Asia that's going to cost millions and millions of dollars. He'll probably stop here in Hawaii, which means we'll have the Secret Service prowling around our tomato plants again or something stupid.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
All right, thank you. We're going to quickly grab Dave in Texas. Dave, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Cool. I'm not going to keep you long. I came across something, I spoke to you yesterday, but I came across something that I think pretty sure you might be able to illuminate many people, and it has to do with I think it's the 13th Amendment. I'm just going to put the words, and you'll probably know what I'm talking. The title of nobility. And
you're talking the original 13th Amendment.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a 13th Amendment which basically restricted all members of the government from accepting any kind of honors, titles, or emoluments from foreign governments, and somehow that one kind of went away. And that's a little dark chapter in constitutional history. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, probably if you're going out to any U.S. government websites or most U.S. government websites, you're seeing this banner message, due to the lapse in federal government funding, this website is not available. And NASA's website is saying that, lock.gov, thomas.gov, ftc.gov, all of these things. This website is not available. It's another propaganda fraud, because if you are seeing these not available messages, the website servers are still up and running just fine. The staff could have walked out of their offices and left those government websites fully operational on their own, just like the What Really Happened server still operates when I sleep at night. If those websites at the government had actually shut down, your browser would return a server not found error. Those government websites are still running. Somebody spent money to change the main pages at that site to the not available message as part of a propaganda campaign to get you to accept those portions of the government you hate to get to those parts of the government you still want. It's all theater. It's all fraud and deception. And of course, those parts of the government we do not approve of are still running like clockwork. NSA spying is still up and running. They're still opening their brand new $2 billion data center. Viper sweeps are still operating. Domestic drone flights are still continuing. What they shut down were those parts of the government the people actually like and approve of. And it is extortion. If you want to get to NASA and NOAA and all these other things that are actually of some benefit, you're just going to have to go along with accepting NSA spying and TSA groping and all the rest of it. That's what this is. It's all theater. This unavailable due to funding cut is complete hoax. Those servers are clearly still operating. Now, on top of the brouhaha over the World War II veterans in Washington, and I am firmly on the side of those veterans being allowed to tour the nation's monuments. I've never actually been to Washington, D.C. myself. A lot of good museums, I understand. But apparently, closing the national parks could spark a public outcry similar to 1995. This is over at Mercury News. And that may be what the government wants, that when people start screaming and complaining, I can't get to the national parks, I can't get to NASA, I can't get to NOAA, that it will build pressure for Congress to cave in and give Obama his Obamacare and an increase in a debt ceiling, both of which are complete nonsense. They're just rip-offs of the American people, including future generations. We need to open the parks and close the government, is what we need to do. Permanently, the whole thing, not 6%, 100%. And there are so many areas that should be cut and weren't. We have this interesting article out of U.S. News and NBC. The latest watchdog report on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter reveals that it has hundreds and hundreds of problems. It is not performing up to specifications. It is the single costliest weapons program in U.S. history. It's cost more than the gross domestic product of Australia to design and build this plane, and it's still not in active service. They fly it around to the air shows to say, see, look how wonderful we're doing. But apparently, at the end of this 16-month investigation that began in February of last year, the Inspectors General Office issued a report identifying more than 360 quality issues with the F-35, 147 of them classified as major. Things like it can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain. The naval version can't land on a carrier because the arrestor hook is too close to the main landing gear. The helmet control fire system still has not been delivered. They can't get the software to work. And this is not unique. The F-22 is still causing breathing problems for its pilots. They can't identify that. I did a flashback story on these two U.S. Navy ships, the Benjamin Isherwood and the Henry Eckford, that cost you, the taxpayer, $300 million. And the instant they were completed for the hull, they were simply sent to the scrapyard because they'd been completely boondoggled. The Pentagon has spent $19 billion trying to build systems that will detect improvised explosive devices. Remember that scandal where somebody took these joke golf ball detectors and relabeled them and actually got a contract selling those to the Pentagons, and they were completely useless, getting our kids killed. After spending $19 billion, the Pentagon finally came to the conclusion that bomb detector dogs were still the best option. $19 billion. Then, of course, we have that $40 billion littoral combat ship program, which has produced ships which are underarmed, under-armored. Their computer systems are wide open to outside hacking. They don't work. It's just finding ways to take money from you and give it to their good buddies, their political supporters, their cronies here. The missile defense system, $35 billion. Down here in Pearl Harbor, we have this giant floating sea-based radar. It was $1 billion all by itself, only succeeding in 50% of its tests, which means an enemy attacking the United States only has to launch 2 nuclear missiles to get one of them through. And it's already an obsolete technology because it's based on a ballistic intercept, and Russia and China's latest generations of nuclear warheads are maneuverable. They corkscrew, they dipsy-doodle, they weave back and forth, which makes a ballistic forecast and interception absolutely impossible. And it's not just military spending. The Federal Bureau of Land Management, and this is a story out of 12160. The Federal Bureau of Land Management paid $98,000 for the purchase and installation of an outhouse at the Swede Park Trailhead in Alaska. It's just a glorified porta potty. $98,000. I actually saw one of these go in when I was still living in Seattle. And we had this wilderness area, and it was all this environmental control and nature, and we can't disrupt anything. And they built this restroom facility with solar panels on the top, spent gobs of money on it, and it turned out it wasn't going to work because there were trees overhead blocking the solar panels. And so they solved the problem by cutting down the trees. So much for environmental concern. Now let's get on to Obamacare. This is a disaster. This is a Charlie Foxtrot in the making. And Obama and his White House staff and everybody is still trying to put a brave face on it. And they're saying, oh, it's insanely popular. That's the reason everyone was having problems. Everybody's signing up for this. Everybody, oh, it's incredibly. The first day batting average for online Obamacare applications is 0,000. There are now at least 51 identified problems that keep this system from working. Okay? It was impossible to use the system. A lot of the local exchanges are already disconnecting certain features because they can't get them to work. Now, MarketWatch logged in to test the system, and they got 0 for 51. They tried to log in and fill out the online forms 51 times. They were not able to succeed at all. But you wouldn't know it listening to the corporate media, and you wouldn't know it certainly listening to the White House. HSS Secretary Sebelius is calling it Obamacare mania and how wildly successful the program was. And the reason it's got glitches and stuff is the popularity of the site. Well, you know, Google is popular. But when you type a request into Google, it doesn't come back and say, I'll have your search results next February. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. So the Obama White House is out there saying that really all these glitches are a good thing, because it shows how insanely popular Obamacare is. And as I said at the close of the last segment, Google is popular. But when you type a search request into Google, it doesn't come back and say, I'll give you your search results next February. Now, of course, having lied about Obamacare and lied about its readiness to put into operation, and seeing how they're trying to lie and spin their way out of this absolute disaster with this software, of course they're going to lie about people signing up. They're not going to admit error. They're not going to back off and say, well, I guess it wasn't ready to go ahead. Because everybody's thinking in terms of their ego and vanity, and they're all doubling up on their SSRIs. But somebody actually did a study up in Connecticut. According to Congressman Jim Hines, 28,000 visitors to the Connecticut Exchange. Out of 28,000 visitors, only 167 actually signed up. That is less than 1%. So people are logging in to see what all the fuss is about, but they're not signing up. In many cases, people who want to sign up can't. It is that messed up. And there has already been a major data breach. The system isn't even really live yet. There's a huge data leak. Personal information of 2,400 people has been exposed. It was accidentally, wrongfully sent to a private insurance company. Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying Obamacare is another private sector ripoff of Americans under color of law, and he's absolutely right about that. We're going to go to the phones here. Dave in California. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You were talking about the F-35, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're aware of the test that was made, I'm not exactly sure if it was last year, but they actually tested the aircraft against current Russian fighters.
Yes.
And some other models. And the pilots said it was like clubbing baby seals to fight against the F-5, or the F-35.
Yeah, I read that report. The Pentagon came out and said because of its stealth design, there's limited visibility to the rear. It is far heavier than it was supposed to be. Its maneuverability is nowhere near what it was claimed it was going to be. The Pentagon actually considered simply rewriting the requirements for the F-35 so they can say, yes, it meets its requirements and we can start deploying them. Now the Pentagon is talking about just canceling the program outright, after all this money has been spent.
Mm-hmm. Well, these designs, the stealth designs, F-22, B-2, and the F-35 are superfluous anyway because they are Cold War designs, okay, and designed to penetrate a Soviet radar environment. So they were superfluous anyway. And the F-22 in particular... Not
if we wind up in another war with Russia, they aren't.
Well, I think they're working on that.
Yeah, they are.
They
are. Ever since Russia took control of their central bank, have you noticed how the bashing Russia propaganda is going up? And Russia won't let us do what we need to do in Syria, and Russia's going to ban GMO, and we have to invade and conquer them. It's the will of Monsanto.
Okay. Well, in any case, we don't have the weapons to counter them.
No, we don't.
Because not only are they developing these weapons, which are useless, but they can't get enough of them fielded to even put up a reasonable fight. The B-2, there's only 20 of them. And I don't know how many F-22s are out, but there's certainly not enough to make a dent in any sort of combat scenario.
Didn't they lose one of the B-2s down in New Zealand? The pitot froze over, and the computerized flight system wasn't able to compensate for it, and the pilot wasn't able to take manual control soon enough, and they pancaked one of those things onto the runway.
Well, that was actually Guam.
That was Guam. You're right, that was Guam. Okay.
Taken off out of it. There's a video of that.
They rekitted that one.
Yeah. Well, they've always said in that design that it was incapable of flying in the rain. And I actually spoke to a person who supplies the parts for that aircraft at a party, and he was sitting there and listening to me, basically cut his airplane to ribbons. And I said, well, can they fly it in the rain? And he said, oh, yeah, it'll fly in the rain. It still can't fly in the rain.
There's two different overlapping things. The reason the F-35 can't fly in the rain is because the electronics start malfunctioning. The fuselage apparently is not moisture-proof. In the case of the B-2 and the B-1 Lancers, the reason it can't fly in the rain is because if it's wet, it loses its stealth. It becomes instantly visible on radar.
Well, yes, there is that aspect, but actually the damage occurs to the material that they use to coat the aircraft.
I had not known. If the plane gets rained on, it starts melting?
Well, there is noticeable deterioration of the coating that they use on the aircraft. So that's one aspect of flying in the rain. They also say that the moisture collects in certain portions of the aircraft and causes malfunctions of the electronics.
Oh, so it's got the same problem that the F-35. We all know that military procurement in this country is a joke, and it is all about taking money from you and giving it to the defense contractors who are all loyal supporters of their members of Congress, and it's just a giant scam. And I know I keep mentioning this, but it's certainly worth mentioning again. There is a wonderful book and a movie made from it called The Pentagon Wars. Richard Benjamin directed the film, and it is based on the true story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, and how it just, everybody kept adding things on there and adding things on there and spending more money until they came up with this hideously expensive piece of junk that wouldn't actually accomplish anything. And it's a reminder, the United States makes a big deal of the fact that they spend more money on the machinery of death than the next 26 nations combined, 25 of whom are supposedly allies. But we're not getting bang for our buck. We're fielding these hideously complicated, very delicate, fragile, unreliable weapons systems. Other countries are spending their money much more wisely. And so the fact that we're spending more money on our military does not, in fact, guarantee us victory in a prolonged conventional war because of the poor quality of these systems that are going on out there.
Well, luckily, we're picking enemies that can't fight back so far.
Yeah, but we're running out of those. That's why they're starting to talk about Iran, China, and Russia.
Well, we don't have a chance against China, but
or Russia.
Russia, we'll give them at least a couple of weeks of, as long as our buffs hold out. But, Russia will lose. China will lose. Korea,
I disagree. I disagree. And the reason for that is right now the United States is militarily exhausted. All the stockpiles are drawn down. We don't have the money to fight a major prolonged world war, and nobody's going to loan it to us, and nobody wants to take those printed up U.S. dollars from the Federal Reserve. We've lost our manufacturing that really allowed the United States to be on the winning side in big mistake number one and big mistake number two. And even with all those instantly created citizens, we don't really have the manpower to put the boots on the ground. And let's be realistic. If you get all of these Mexicans who are granted amnesty and made instant U.S. citizens, do you really think they're going to be committed fighters out there on the field? They're just going to crouch down and hide in the hole. They're not going to be an effective fighting force. And the U.S. right now, the U.S. government is making the same strategic mistake that Adolf Hitler did toward the end of World War II. They're becoming dependent on their high-technology wonder weapons. And they're amazing wonder weapons when and if they work. But, the lesson of Vietnam is you can't win a war from the sky or from orbit. If you don't have boots on the ground to take and control territory, you will ultimately lose. And Russia's already made it very clear. When the U.S. goes into Syria or Iran, Russia will just pour in supplies and weapons on the other side, turn it into a new Vietnam, and grind the United States down in a war of attrition. Russia has the economy to do that, and the U.S. does not.
Well, unfortunately, you're right, and unfortunately, people don't listen to you. And
well, a lot of people do listen to me, but not the right ones.
Yeah. But it's probably a very probable scenario that you're discussing. So.
Well, that's why it's so important. We have got to pull this war wagon down because the ultimate, when the U.S. gets into a war with Russia and China, and they're not going to be able to prevail, and somewhere between that point and final capitulation by the U.S. government, they will resort to their nuclear weapons, and it's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. We've got to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at this story out of INFOWARS.com, and basically it's relating, and we've heard this before, that if you fail to comply with Obamacare, you will be fined. And Obamacare is being managed by the Internal Revenue Service. And by the way, those people are still working. They're not part of the government shutdown. Anybody who's out there grabbing money for the government, they still have full employment. And we were talking before how the fines start out small, but year after year, they get huge. So this story is reporting about somebody who attempted to sign up for Obamacare was told that a fine of over $4,000 a year for refusing to take out mandatory health insurance would be taken directly from his bank account. His driver's license could be suspended and a tax lien placed against his house. Does that sound like a free nation? Remember, when the government takes your tax money and spends it on things like wars and NSA and Israel and the rest of it, and then turns around and says, you will buy this with the money we've allowed you to keep. That's another hidden form of taxation. We here in the United States of America, we've got the worst of both worlds. We have got sky-high taxes. But in other countries, like France or Norway, where the taxes are as high, the government gives something back to the people. Low-cost higher education, low-cost, if not free, health care, good roads, good schools, good hospitals. Here in the U.S., after paying all those taxes and being allowed to keep a few pennies in our pockets, we're expected to go into debt to the bankers to pay for our higher education and just fork over more and more of our money for all this health care. We have all the taxation of a modern socialist state with none of the benefits, which means we're not socialist, we are fascist. Go back and study the economic realities of any fascist dictatorship in history and you will see the same thing. The people taxed into poverty and the government giving all the benefits to the already rich. And that's exactly where we are right now. And it's this idea that Obamacare fines are going to be taken from the bank accounts is another reason to never have in the bank more than you need to cover your immediate obligations. In fact, now is probably a really good time to pull your money out of the bank and go back to using cash. Forget those swipe cards, forget especially those credit cards. You shouldn't be using credit cards to do your grocery shopping. I see that happening all the time at Safeway. Forget those swipe cards. Use cash. Pull your money out of the bank because the banks are not working for you. They're working for the government and they're working for the money junkies. Now, Bill Clinton came out with one of his usual... actually, before I go back to Bill Clinton, we're going to take a phone call here. Kyle in Philadelphia. Oh, I'm sorry. We still have Keith in Montana. Okay, I got a little confused. We got two callers on the line. We're going to start with Keith in Montana.
Hey, Michael. You there?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. Hey, I got two things for you there. One was on Afghanistan. Did you hear about the two generals that had been discharged?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you hear why?
Well, I understand that apparently somebody claiming to be or proclaimed to be the Taliban went in and destroyed something like $200 million worth of U.S. military hardware.
Yeah, I mean, that's atrocious there. I mean, the British were also in charge of the security there, too. But, you know, that just shows you more of this government waste, you know.
Yeah, I've seen it up close and personal. I've seen it myself here. In fact, I'm going to relate a little story, and I apologize to the callers waiting online because we're probably going to go into the next hour. But many, many, many years ago when I was working for NASA, I was involved with a project to phase lock radio telescopes across a wide part of the planet. Now, it's common practice today, but back then I was involved in one of the first efforts to try and do that. And as our relay between the radio telescope that used to be at the Table Mountain Observatory and the radio telescopes over at Goldstone, we were putting our repeaters into already existing sites called the Gator sites, which were a radio relay network system for military use all across the California deserts. And we were out there in the middle of the boonies, and we're putting our stuff in there. We're hanging out with the guys who were doing maintenance on the Gator site. And they needed some diodes, little tiny diodes. And so the commander of this group that was maintaining the Gator site, not our people, the other people, called up wherever it is they call up to get diodes and was told that a special delivery run of the truck was not allowed unless there was a minimum load. They were not allowed to send out a truck for just one box of diodes. So the guy who was in charge of all of this thing said, well, look, just put anything on the truck that you're not using to get to that minimum load because we need those diodes tomorrow. And the next day the truck showed up and it unloaded and unloaded and unloaded and unloaded and just piled all this hideously expensive stuff all over the ground. And then they left. And it was basically the attitude was, we don't care what you do with it. You know, we're not going to take it back. Just throw it away. And it was certainly a windfall for those of us who were doing board-level electronic development, because we walked out of there with just tons of amazing stuff, all at taxpayer expense. Masters specialty switches, you've probably seen them. They're the little rectangular ones that light up when you push on them. Saw them all over the flight consoles at NASA. Those were, and we're talking back in the 1980s, $35 each. Just hideous amounts of waste. I saw more of it when I was involved with this project at Martin Marietta. And it is a scale of spending most Americans don't understand. Martin Marietta was involved in the Star Wars defense. They were getting ready to do a big production to sell their idea of C-Cubed to the U.S. Congress. They actually got some of the people who had done the film War Games to come out and design a set that looked impressive to control battle management in orbit. And we were hired, I was working for Robert Abel & Associates, we were hired to make the computer-animated graphics to simulate the displays on all of this thing. And it was a huge amount of money. And most Americans right now, finance for them is drops of water coming out of the faucet. And these people in the military, they've got fire hoses. And it is a scale of spending most Americans really have a hard time getting their hands around. Just how much money is flowing through that.
Yeah, Mike?
Yeah?
Am I still here?
Yes, you're still there.
Yeah, okay. The other thing I was wanting to talk to you about, Gordon Duss had a great thing with Jeff Rentz last night about out of the 12 years war in Afghanistan, there's only been like 6 photos taken of the U.S. military and the actual opium production over there in Afghanistan. And you know how we daily hear of the hundreds of billions of dollars laundered by, with drug money through Wells Fargo, HSBC. But that was another thing of the issue of this massive drug scale. You imagine hundreds of, over 100,000 some odd U.S. troops, plus the British and other allied forces over there in Afghanistan, fighting this alleged war over there like that, and yet opium production's up 800%.
Well, there's more than just 6 photos, because we've got about 20 of them on our page regarding opium in Afghanistan. And yeah, it's a war to secure a supply of drug for American drug lords and the banks who launder their money. And the link between drugs and war is long-running. Britain actually fought a war against China to protect their right to sell opium to the Chinese people. The British actually bought their opium from here in the United States of America. It was a legal cash crop back then. It was politely referred to as the China trade. But the American farmers were growing opium poppies. The British were taking it and selling it to the people in China, which eventually was one of the contributing causes to the collapse of the imperial government and the rise of communism. And let me finish this. I'm going to hold you over the commercial break here because I know you got more to say here. Vietnam, of course, was known for Air America and the CIA buying opium from Kun Sa up in Burma and smuggling it back into the U.S. inside the body bags of the Vietnam dead. Iran-Contra was neck-deep in cocaine. The Skull and Bones Fraternity, where all of our social political leaders came, was originally funded with opium money. It is a hidden core aspect of America's political history. And, yeah, I'm not at all surprised. When the Taliban was ruling Afghanistan, the opium production was zero. They had a zero-tolerance policy. You were caught with an opium poppy, they'd cut your hand off at the very least. America comes in, and the poppies are blooming like crazy. And the American excuse is, oh, well, if we took away the poppy production, these people would have nothing to live on. What were they living on before when the Taliban outlawed poppy production? And, of course, opium and heroin is now flowing into the United States of America. It's flowing into Russia. It's another reason Russia's very unhappy with the U.S. government. So, Keith, stay on the phone. We've got a break for Phyllis Schlafly and some commercials. I'll come back to you after the break and then to Kyle in Philadelphia. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to Keith in Montana. Keith, you had something else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I had 2 little short things. One, I really appreciated your comment there about the parts for the military. I know how it is when you, like on my repeater system here in Montana, when you're out of part, you got to drive down the mountain 2 hours down there to get to town there, or another hour and a half away like that. Just get a simple diode or resistor like that. So I understood how that meant. But anyway, I was going to say there in closing there, and you can, I'll say this. You can comment online. I'll hang up there, but those F-35s, wouldn't it be simpler to give those to Israel? That way it would protect the Gazans and those people over in Lebanon?
Actually, apparently Israel is acquiring a couple of squadrons of the F-35s.
Yeah, but if they don't fly, then perhaps the people that would.
They'll probably get them at a discount. One of the common scams that we see here is the U.S. government will buy a hideously expensive weapons system and then declare it surplus, and it's then sold off to Israel for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's not all I had here. My best to you and your wife there, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. And apparently Kyle dropped off the line there. Sorry to keep you waiting there, Kyle. All right, now, getting back to what Bill Clinton was saying the other day. Apparently, he's already out there helping to push for Hillary's run for president in 2016. And apparently he made this comment about Obamacare. And this is a direct quote. Quote, "I just think that when all these dire predictions don't come out, if they don't, I believe that pretty soon, within the next several years, this will be like Medicare and Medicaid, and it'll be a normal part of our life, and people will be glad it's there." I'm sure every political tyrant said something similar, saying that in time you'll love communism. And that's basically what Obama is saying, that you will get to love your socialized medicine, except that this isn't socialized medicine. If it was socialized medicine like they had under communism, you would go to the doctor and you would get taken care of, and your own out-of-pocket costs would be minimal. This is fascist medical care. And everyone's screaming about communism, communism, communism. We are not transitioning to communism or socialism. We are descending into fascism. And we're going to reprise our definitions. Capitalism is a system in which if you make money, you keep it. And if you lose money, you alone are responsible for that debt. Because freedom not only means the freedom to succeed, but the freedom to fail and the responsibility to live with either outcome. That's the system this nation started with. Now, socialism or communism is a system where if you make money, it is taxed away to benefit society, and if you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses. Now, fascism is a system in which if you make money, you get to keep it. And when you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses. And after TARP, bail out this, bail out that, money flowing out the back of the Federal Reserve to prop up Wall Street, endless quantitative easing driving Americans into poverty while enriching the wealthiest ruling class in history, what system do you think we're under right now? It's not capitalism. We're not a capitalist nation any longer. And it's not socialism either. And the way to tell the difference very easily between socialism and fascism is the bias in the flow of wealth. Because under communism, the bias is from the wealthier people to the general population. And under fascism, it's exactly the reverse. The bias in cash flow is from the people to the wealthy. And that's where we are right now. And Lenin actually predicted that when Western capitalism failed, it would inevitably become fascistic, trying to protect and prolong itself. And that's exactly where we are right now. I really get very angry at these people in the corporate media who are screaming that the Occupy protesters and the Tea Party are anti-capitalist. No, they're not. They're anti-fascist. And they are not supporting communism, except for the hired actors with their signs, posing for the media. We want to go back to the capitalist system that worked for the American people. First and foremost, we need to be freed from that private central bank issuing the public currencies alone at interest. And again, the question everybody ought to be asking as they argue about the debt ceiling is, why is the federal government borrowing currency at interest from a privately owned bank when Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution authorizes the U.S. government to create and issue its own interest-free, debt-free money? That's the system this nation was started with, the public currency as a public utility, and it worked. It worked for the people of America. It worked for the United States. But the private central bankers, the money junkies, can't stand the idea of a nation and people free of debt. And they will do anything to enslave the entire planet to their little Ponzi scheme, private central banking scam. Now, earlier in the show, I was talking about how Obama and his decision-making, which may be muddled by SSRIs and may not, but he's definitely coming from a position of his ego and his vanity. He's worried about his legacy. Obamacare has my name on it. That is why it will move forward. And we made a great deal of fun over the U.S. flag that the Obama campaign put out with his face where the stars used to go in the blue field. And it was a huge exercise of vanity and ego, and it was a slap in the face to all of our military who fought all these wars beneath the stars and bars. Now we're hearing this other little story. This came out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain, where there was this school in Wisconsin, a middle school, has been forced to apologize after showing students a video that was produced right after Obama's 2008 election that had celebrities pledging to be, quote, a servant to the president. And the video was produced by Oprah Winfrey and had celebrities like Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher, Cameron Diaz, and Eva Longoria. Now, we the people are servants to nobody, up to and including the president. The president is supposed to be the servant of the people. So is the Congress. That's the way it was set up. They are our employees. And when they are not doing the job that we laid out for them in that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we have a right to fire them. And I think we're getting close to that point right now. Non-violently, peacefully, because remember, this government has been preparing for a violent uprising by the people. That's what they want. They know how to deal with that. They know how to deal with angry mobs in the streets. We'll just go in with all those armored cars they've been giving the police departments and just crush those upstart slaves. They'll gladly kill 25% of the American population as long as the remaining 75% go back to being loyal little tax slaves who will give their hard-earned money to the private central banks, buy the products they're told to buy at the prices they're told to buy them at. By the way, another article that we had linked to whatreallyhappened.com is comparing the cost of medical care in the United States with that up in Canada. And it's a huge difference in terms of the costs. And it's all driven by finance. It should be driven by what is best for the patient, what is best for the health of the nation as a whole. But when you turn disease into a profit opportunity, you guarantee you will have a sickly, chronically ill population. Because this entire medical industrial complex would actually collapse if Americans were healthy. They need us to be sick. They need us to be poisoned by chemicals in the food, GMO, whatever. Meanwhile, apparently, Barack Obama is still trying to cut spending in areas that work for the people, like the Small Business Administration, and he's rolled it into the Commerce Department, supposedly to save $300 million a year. Meanwhile, the Pentagon, despite the embarrassment of losing $3 trillion back in 2001, the Pentagon's own auditors are saying 25% of the Pentagon's expenditures can't be explained. The money just flows out the door. Billions and billions of dollars, and nobody, even in the Pentagon, knows where that money is going. Does that sound like wise fiscal management and prudent government? Doesn't sound like it to me. I'm going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, obviously the government shutdown has shut down those portions of the government we, the people, actually need and want. And apparently the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced yesterday that there will be no September job report this coming Friday because, hey, we're furloughed, we're on vacation. Now, from the point of view of the government, this is probably a good thing because the numbers are not likely to be good, even with all the manipulations we know they are doing to try and get the numbers to look good. But ADP has already announced that private sector hiring did not come up to the forecasts. There was a tiny number of jobs added, but nowhere near what anybody was predicting. And there's an important message there. The government likes to claim they are the font of all knowledge and awareness in our culture. And when they shut down NASA and NOAA and all these other websites, that all of a sudden we'll be saying, oh, we're cut off, we're isolated. No, we're not, because there's all these other places, all these other websites where you can find the same information. And again, if you are getting the message at a government website, this website is shut down due to the financial, funding crisis here. It's a fake. The servers are clearly still operating. those workers at those websites like NASA, they could just say, all right, I'm off, and walk out the door and leave the websites running as they are. Somebody spent money to put up those signs saying this website's unavailable due to the fiscal crisis. It's all propaganda. Getting onto the economy here, article over at 12160, Bank Secrets Exposed in European Union Credit Derivatives Investigation. And apparently, the United States does not regulate credit default swaps or derivatives of any kind, and they don't investigate the misuse of them. That was set as national policy back in 2008, in the middle of that mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, and how the credit default swaps hammered companies like AIG. And they said, well, we'll continue to leave it, just do what you want, we're not going to do anything. But the European Union has started investigating, and they're beginning to find massive financial fraud going on. Now, another interesting article over at theexaminer.com, the senior attorney for the World Bank has just, or the former senior attorney for the World Bank, because she got fired for whistleblowing in 2007, has come out and said the 1% are thugs, crooks, liars, and everybody knows it. And when you think about it, when the entire system rests on this Ponzi scheme, private central bank issuing the public currencies alone at interest, you understand the entire system is a fraud. To loot you of your wealth, your work product, to permanently enslave you, to artificially created debt, and through your belief that this debt is something real and tangible, to control you. It is the essence of the banking industry to keep us all, whether we are nations or individuals, slaves to debt, to keep us under control. And what is sadly lacking in government and the corporate media are people willing to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes. It is a fraud, and that's why I've been hammering that question. Why is the federal government even arguing about raising the debt limit to borrow more currency from a private central bank at interest when the federal government has the legal authority under the Constitution to simply create and issue its own currency interest-free? Why are they not doing that? It's a rhetorical question. We know why they aren't doing that. Those Wall Street bankers, the Federal Reserve, are gigantic campaign donors. They buy every single election that comes along. Nobody is allowed into Congress who does not swear undying fealty to the money junkies and to Israel. So, now, I remember back in Los Angeles when this whole hue and cry about preserving natural resources, alternative energy, was really starting to crank up. And there was this ridiculous story about an architect who designed and built a completely self-sufficient home. It generated its own power, was completely cut off from the grid. And the state of California literally came in and said that unless he wired and hooked his house up to the public electric utility, they would condemn it and demolish it. Now we're seeing this story here, this is over at Market Watch, where utilities in solar-friendly states are now looking for ways where they can charge customers who are using solar panels to make up for lost revenue. Because that revenue is what's important, not energy or quality of service or alternatives or environment. It's always about keeping the money up. Remember that story where we're seeing where states are going to start taxing people who have bought high-efficiency hybrid cars to make up for the lost gasoline tax revenues that they should be getting. This money is supposed to come our way, and if you got a fuel-efficient car, you're defrauding the state of their tax revenues, that is, their rightly due. And now we're seeing utilities in states with a lot of solar panels on the roofs looking at ways to simply charge these people a fee for not accepting electricity from the grid. So the U.S. government handed out taxpayer money taken from you to subsidize solar panel companies, many of which failed, like Solyndra. And now the people who bought and installed those solar panels on their homes to save money on their utility bills are going to be charged extra. You get screwed at both ends. This lust for money to make sure that the ledgers on all those big banks on Wall Street stay in the black has distorted our society. It's become the only priority, the only agenda for anybody in government and the financial system. Nobody's worried about the health and safety of the general population, the quality of our infrastructure. It's a monomaniacal obsession with, we've got to get more of those little numbers onto our ledger to stay in the black. And the problem is they actually believe this, like some arcane religion, that the world will end if the red ink dares drop on the bottom of their ledgers. Modern economics is not a science. It's a religion. It's an arbitrarily created set of rules to benefit the clergy, meaning the bankers, and we are all brainwashed into believing this is the way it was supposed to be. That's why I keep saying that this rule by compound interest model is no more a legitimate form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former failed systems, it only works as long as you allow yourself to believe this is the way it's supposed to be. And we all need to become private central banking heretics and say, no, this is not the true state of the universe. This is not the way it's supposed to be. It's certainly not the way the country started. Seeing another article, and this is over at Blacklisted News. The millennials devastated as American dream becomes a nightmare for most. And it's talking about all these kids lured into college educations and student loans with promises of high-paying jobs with which to pay the loans off. And they're coming out of these colleges, and there's nothing out there. We were talking yesterday about how job centers are encouraging job searchers to dumb down their resumes and take off their college degrees, so they don't appear overqualified to go to work for places like fast food restaurants, dry cleaning places. Apparently up in Redmond, there's a bit of a kerfuffle going on. 3 of the top 20 investors in Microsoft are lobbying the board of directors to press Bill Gates to resign as chairman. So all is not well in Microsoft land. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Quick note, author Tom Clancy, who wrote all those techno thrillers, has passed away at age 66. It's rather interesting. In the early reports, all they would say is that he died in a hospital and there was no other explanation for what was going on. And in light of the recent revelation that 400,000 Americans die every year from medical mistakes, and I think that includes Neil Armstrong, I have to wonder if somebody goofed, because I was not aware of any ongoing issue with Tom Clancy here. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. Paul in Canada. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mikey. How you doing, man?
Doing all right.
All right, buddy. Listen, Tom Clancy, great author, lots of really good and intriguing essays on life in the real world, and it was kind of fictional, some of the stuff, but...
Well, I don't know about real world, because one of the issues I had with Tom Clancy, besides glorifying modern warfare, was his continued portrayal of the CIA as a swell bunch of Joes, and we know that was just a complete fiction.
True.
So, and he got very successful by putting out the image of the CIA that the U.S. government and the CIA wanted to be put out.
True, but he was connected.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, but what I really called for, Mike, on another note, is, F-35s and Obamacare and all this stuff. It's kind of I sent you an email earlier today, and it's a matter of up here in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all the colonial powers. We rely on the United States of America.
That may be your first and biggest mistake.
But we rely on the people of the United States of America to continue to do what they have done for us for the last 200 years and to continue on with the legacy of liberty and freedom for the individual. And, Mike, I can't tell you how much that means for all of us. We sit here in awe of what's going on down there. And, we really need you guys. We need you guys. I know I'm preaching to the choir at RBN, but, we need you guys to stand up and, lead us. And you are the beacon of liberty and freedom, and it should not be forgotten, and you people need to continue to lead us. And, I don't know what else to say, Mike.
Well, thank you very much for those very, very kind words. And I think the reason so many Americans are now standing up is we recognize the issues and the threat from what is going on inside this country extend way beyond the borders of just our country. This is a global crisis that's been brought about by this predatory private central banking model that inevitably, 1, 2, 3 step, goes from private central banking to wars of conquest to balance the most holy ledger in the bowels of Wall Street. And
that's what I'm trying to say, is that this is not just about the American people, Mike. This is like the whole Western world, Mike.
It's the whole planet. It's the whole planet because, we are literally looking at a potential for a global thermonuclear war to prop up a piece of ink and paper. And
it has nothing to do with American people.
That's right.
That's the bottom line. And the American people, like you and I have had back and forth, time and time again, with, religion and, people and, where they come from and so on and so forth. But the American legacy, Mike, is at hand here, and it does not do the American people any good to lay down and accept this kind of corporatocracy that has manifested itself.
Well, it's never good for any people to lie down before tyranny and dictatorship. It certainly didn't work for the German people or the Russian people under the Soviet Union. And again, history and certainly the popular media tends to assign a collective guilt to entire people for the crimes of the government. All the Germans were bad, all the Japanese were bad. No, they weren't. They had bad government. And it's very important for the American people right now to get that message out there that, we the American people aren't part of what's going on in Washington, D.C. We don't approve of it. We don't agree with it. We will not be historically demonized because of it.
That's right, Mike. And I just want to, again, emphasize that, I know I'm preaching to the choir with the RBN listeners, but, there's a lot of people around the world that are counting on you people down in the United States that really understand individual freedom and individual rights and liberty, like Ron Paul has preached for so many years now. And, we need it, and I don't want to be eating out of the garbage before the rest of the world wakes up.
Well, we're doing our best, and we're going to keep on doing it just as long as we're able. I'm going to let you go here because Kyle in Pennsylvania called back, and I don't want to keep him waiting too long, or he might have to hang up again. Thanks an awful lot. Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Kyle, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. All those discount auto commercials you see, we keep you legal for less, and, the minimum legal insurance you need to drive a car. All those. How much do you want to bet within the next 6 months you're going to see commercials for that, for Obamacare?
I'm sure of it, but the bottom line here is if you go and you get one of those minimum legal policies, you're not getting a lot of coverage, and you will be responsible for whatever's excluded or whatever the insane deductible is. And the cost of medical care in the United States, it's the most expensive medical care on earth by orders of magnitude, and it's something like 30th in terms of quality. And so the American people are really caught between a rock and a hard place on all of this.
Well, and that brings me to the next point, and it's like when you get pulled over by the cops for not having insurance or for not having your registration or for not having a turn signal or whatever. It's a shakedown. It's an absolute, complete shakedown. Anytime they pull you over, you know that they're going to find something to either give you a ticket and pay them money or what have you, and that's what we're going to. This whole Obama thing is just more revenue-generating method.
That's exactly right.
For the government.
That's exactly right. I mean,
as soon as the people can realize that this has nothing to do with your best interest. This has nothing to do with you being healthy or you being, having insurance, and it's just more ways for the government to get money from your pocket, the better off we will be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have seen the fines for even minor traffic infractions just go up by factors of 10 and 20, and it's all about revenue generating. Revenue generation, we understand the police keep denying that there are quotas, and yet we get confirmation that there are. We know that police departments all across the country, and certainly it's true here on Hawaii, police officers are pulled away from investigating crimes, and they're sent out on traffic duty and say, write tickets, write tickets, write tickets. And if you look at the cost of those tickets and how many are written out, you realize it is a substantial portion of the funding for the local government. So we're basically down to a point where the people of this nation are being pillaged by this occupational government to fund itself. And at some point, the American people have got to start getting angry at what's going on, not because of how they are being abused, but because we can look into the future and see how our children and their children will be subject to even more abuse than we ourselves are.
Well, brings me to my next point. Like, you look at the city of Oakland, where the police won't respond to a list of something like 47 crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the only job that the police have there is to generate revenue.
Oh, well, they'll certainly show up at those Occupy protests. They'll certainly do that. But yeah, for a list of minor crimes, you just go to their website and you fill out the report. They send you back the thing for your insurance, your homeowner's insurance, to get reimbursed. It's all a business, and the criminals are just running free and rampant all across the country. Okay?
And it's the last session. Governments destroy freedom. Religions destroy spirituality. Schools destroy education. And health systems destroy your health.
Yeah, we got to go now for commercials. Thank you for the call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take a phone call. Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I just wanted to make a reference here to what follow through with what the previous caller was saying, and that is that there is an understanding that all rights come from property, and if that's so, which I believe it is, then what's the ultimate property that we really truly own? I say that it's our bodies. Mm-hmm. So this Obamacare, it's not about health, it's not about security, it's not about low cost anything. What it's about ultimate control of your body. And when the government can mandate and tell you what to do, bend over, you need to take this vaccine, even though you're healthy and you're fully healthy and everything's okay, but because somebody down the street got a cold, you're going to have to take the vaccine because we say so. That's government mandated health care, and that's what. And then if you violate it, then what happens? If you're in violation, at some point, I suppose it's a minimal deal to begin with, but they'll rev it up to where they make it a maximum deal, like it could be a felony, and then. If you make a violation, now according to the state laws, and this is happening across our nation, this whole deal about war on drugs, all that is a land grab. It's a property grab because the asset seizures and forfeiture laws in the different states, if local law enforcement only is involved, then they're limited to what they can seize, and they have to follow those laws closely. But what I've noticed is if they involve the participation of the federal government, any of the alphabet soup groups, then those local law enforcement entities stand to gain part of the assets, a big part of the assets that are seized. So the point is that, and that's how they've compromised our local state governments. And so what I'm saying here,
very
folks,
much
is that
so. And again, it's all about revenue generation. And we have seen the police break into completely innocent people's homes, trying to find a single marijuana cigarette because they wanted to confiscate the property. There was a huge scandal when I was living in Southern California out in Malibu. There was this very choice property, and the police departments literally have people looking through real estate listings and looking for the expensive homes and saying, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we could find something there and we can take that property? And they broke into this guy's home looking for marijuana plants. The guy wound up being killed defending his home. There were no drugs there. But law enforcement is no longer about finding the criminals preying on the American people. It's about finding forfeiture opportunities. And it is, again, it's another way they're pillaging the population to keep their little government scam going.
And by the way, I'm originally from Missouri, and Missouri got really close to passing a law here recently in a veto override session. It was the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Now, and they were calling it the most important bill to come from any state, the most important law to come from any state concerning the Second Amendment, but also the 10th Amendment to come from any state in a very long time. And the reason why is because in that bill was they were going to nullify federal gun laws within the borders of Missouri. But the deal is the local law enforcement entities, the police chiefs and the sheriffs and all those associations went against it, and they didn't tip their hat till the last. But their comment was that they would feel awkward to have to arrest a federal agent, because in the law they could arrest a federal agent and it would be a Class A misdemeanor, and so they said they would feel awkward that they would have to arrest a federal agent. That isn't the truth. The truth is they would stand to lose a whole lot of potential gain if they had a twinkle in their eye and they wanted your stuff, you know. So. Yep. People, we've got to say no to Obamacare, because my sense of it from the beginning, when I heard about it, I said this is not about health care or any of that. It's about control, and they want to control you down to the nth degree. And if you violate it, they have a reason to snatch you up, take your stuff, and you're done. So anyway, that's what I'd like to share. And thank you for listening, Michael. Appreciate your show.
You're welcome. We already know from the scale of lies and propaganda being showered all over us that this government has no respect for the American people as human beings. They view us as livestock, as two-legged inventory, or whatever you want to call it, and they are treating us just like large industrial commercial ranches treat their livestock. This is what you will eat, this is what you will not eat, this is where you will go, these are the medications you will take, and these are the medications you're not allowed to take. They are absolutely treating us as if we're livestock. I think the polite phrase is human capital. Not to be respected, as citizens of this nation, but simply to be managed and harvested for work, harvested for wealth, breed us for new workers and new soldiers, and that's exactly the way they tend to look at us, and you're absolutely correct. It's, and by the way, rights don't descend from property. I don't agree with that. Rights are something that we already have. The Bill of Rights did not grant rights to us, because rights that are granted by a government can be rescinded. The Bill of Rights recognizes that we have rights the government may never intrude on. And you're absolutely right. If there's one entity that we have automatic dominion over, it is our own personal selves. To decide for ourselves what is best for our health care, especially in a nation where the medical establishment is killing and permanently disabling so many people every year. Vaccines, proven harm, all the rest of that stuff. We should have a right to say, no, I choose a different path. Exercise, lots of water, alkaline diet, herbs and remedies I can grow in my back garden, but it's all about forcing us to buy products from favored cronies, to remove any possible alternatives so that we have no choice but to give our money to somebody who collects the money and gives a piece of the action to the government. That's what's going on. All right, we're almost to the top of the show. Fred in Michigan, real quick, what's on your mind? Fred, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, what's on your mind? You're on the air.
Right. Okay, so while I heard the rights issue, John Adams, second president of the United States, I'm reading from the Citizens Rule Book, a.k.a. Jury Handbook. You've ever read that, Mike?
Actually, no, I have not. I probably ought to. But, heck, the judges and lawyers are ignoring it, so.
Well, this is a good thing to have in your pocket. I actually got it from a now retired U.S. congressman. Every time I saw him, he lived in my neighborhood. He would pull this out of his pocket when I would ask him a constitutional question. So here you open it up, and John Adams, second president, says, rights come from God, not the state. Quote, you have rights antecedent to all earthly governments, rights that cannot be repealed nor restrained by human laws. Rights derive from the great legislator of the universe. What a phrase, eh?
Mm-hmm.
The great legislator of the universe. But, Mike, this Clint Richardson fellow that John has interviewed a few times, Corporation Nation guy.
Yes.
What he brought into focus is the fact that our bodies are actually the collateral used in commerce for this fiat debt currency monetary slave system. And this gal, Deborah Traveris, StopTheCrime.net, she's got it documented on her website. That might be a great interview sometime, to focus on what we can do to take control of our body that's being used in commerce. I think there must be, if they can by subterfuge take our private property, our bodies and names, and put them into commerce as corporations, there's got to be some legal remedy, brother, by which we can gain control of it.
Let me cut you off because we're almost to the top of the hour here. There's no legal remedy when they are writing the laws. And they would never say that we own your physical person, but certainly the entire U.S. economy and all those Treasury bills is backed up with your slave labor. Those Treasury bonds are a promise to take money away from the American people without giving them anything back for it and turn it over to whoever bought the bonds. That's the scam. That is the system of enslavement that we have here. That's what's going on. All right, there's the music. Thank you for the call, Fred. I got to let you go because we got a guest coming on after Phyllis Schlafly and commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. We're still waiting to connect with Mike Nash. And we're seeing a story here coming out of Natural News. The reports are still coming in from all these Obamacare exchanges, and it looks like at the very minimum they are experiencing over 50% failure rates. And the government is out there saying, no, the glitches are good. It means it's a huge success. It's very, very popular. But like I said earlier in the show, Google is popular. But when you type a search request into Google, it doesn't come back and say, we'll give you your search results next February. And we're seeing that all across the country. This is a disaster. This system was not even close to be ready to implement. And Obama was pushing for it to launch on the 1st, not because he thought it was going to work, but because his ego is tangled up in it. This is Obamacare, and you will accept it, because I, his Obamaness, have decreed it. And they're out there saying, there's glitches, in every new technology, but when the Hindenburg blew up, people stopped riding on dirigibles. And Obamacare is blowing up right before our faces. And it makes it even more obvious that Obama is being driven by his ego and vanity. Because the common sense solution, because the people who wrote this $88 million piece of software were saying weeks ago, it is not ready. And the common sense solution would have been to accept that deal from the House of Representatives to delay the implementation of Obamacare for 1 year. That's the common sense, wise, and prudent thing to do. But everybody's ego's tangled up in it. I'm supporting Obamacare and it will go forward because if it's delayed, it will be seen as a political defeat. All righty. Okay, I'm having to do messages with Dan. Dan the man is now in our control room, and apparently there was not a handoff of information. Turning over to Syria, the president of Belarus has basically come out and said any U.S. military intervention in Syria is going to have disastrous repercussions, saying it will literally ignite the entire Middle East. The problem is that's what Israel and the U.S. want, because Israel wants all regional political threats destroyed and broken into little tiny pieces, and the U.S. agenda, of course, is to force all of the resource-rich areas of planet Earth to sell those resources only for the U.S. dollar, so the U.S. gets a piece of the action of all global commerce. They want to revive the petrodollar deal, and they want to force Bretton Woods on the rest of the planet. And China and Russia are not going to go along with that, which is why the U.S. is already trying to sell eventual war with Russia and China, which we will lose. Okay, joining us on the line right now is Mike Nash of Privacy Case. And for those of you who remember the last time he was here, Mike is starting a company to manufacture these little cases for smartphones. And yes, they're a little pricey. He's looking for investors, but it's a very good case to have. For one thing, it is incredibly tough. I rather doubt the TSA could destroy your smartphone if it was encased therein, and I actually do use it to protect my phone when I'm traveling. But the other point of it, of course, is that it blocks all radio signals coming in or out of the phone to maintain your privacy. GPS, the cell phone system, 3G, 4G. And the reason I wanted to have Mike back on the air today to talk about his company is a story that we ran last week about how a security researcher had determined that the latest generations of Intel CPU chips appear to have their own embedded 3G communication system and a second isolated processor with its own operating system, which opens up the possibility that even if your devices are turned off, that they could be activated remotely for nefarious purposes by the NSA. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but the days when you could maintain your cell phone privacy by taking out the batteries seem to be gone. Have you noticed you can't take the batteries out? And everything's software controlled. Even when it's off, it's still on. So, Mike Nash, aloha. Thank you for spending some time with us today. What's the latest word on getting your company off the ground?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on again. Things have been, they were a little bumpy the last time. I had a couple of glitches and issues. We weren't 100% ready as much as I thought we were. But everybody that ordered, for the most part, was really patient and really understanding, and I want to thank everybody that was willing to bear with us through all of that. It really meant a lot to us. The end of October is going to be a whole new world for the company. We did have someone come in. If anybody's interested, it's privacykcase.com. If you go to the website and hit the orange bar, we put together a video that shows several NSA employees explaining that they can turn your phone on when you think it's off, and some of the exposures that you face at privacykcase.com. One of the things that I want to kind of get into the background, into the technology itself. If anybody remembers, your phone is really just a two-way radio. It's not just a two-way radio. It does a lot of neat other things, but it's essentially a two-way radio. And as long as it's broadcasting, it could be located. Now, the way the cellular networks do things, cell and cell phone refers to the coverage area of an individual tower. As you move throughout your day and you go about things, your phone is constantly tracked. Every phone has what's called an IMEI number. It's your International Mobile Equipment Identification Number. It's an independent serial number to your phone specifically, and that is tracked by the cellular network. There's really no way around that part of it, because that's how the networks know what towers to use to send your call, your voice traffic, your text messages, whatever you happen to be doing on your phone at the time. It was originally established that way. I don't believe it was for nefarious purposes. It just happens to be a flaw within the system that you're carrying a beacon. Over time, through legislation, specifically the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which mandated standardized technology in all phones, specifically wireless devices like your cell phone, within 10 years. Now think about that for a second. Does anybody recall in 2006 when we all had to get digital phones because we all had to upgrade? Everybody, it didn't matter what phone you had. That's when they standardized the technology. And every single one of the devices purchased after that is compromised before you ever get it. The back doors are built into these devices, originally for law enforcement use, but because there's enough computer-savvy people in the world, they've figured out how to reverse engineer it, and there's software available on the internet. It's called cell phone spyware, where anyone for as little as $15, I've even seen it for free, you can install the software on someone's cell phone that will allow you to track them, turn their microphone on without them knowing about it, turn their camera on, track the GPS, read all their text messages and emails. For as much as $400, all you need is their cell phone number. You don't even have to touch their device. And that's what's available at the consumer level. Now, as far as backdoors and extra technology, I feel like I live in a country or a society where we're suffering from abused spouse syndrome. We keep being abused repeatedly over and over and over again by corporations and other entities, for lack of a better way to put it. And yet everybody makes excuses. Well, they don't really do it for that, or they didn't mean to do that. The raw reality is they did. Now the question is why? Why does any government want this much information about their population? And if you look at history, it's not good for us.
No, it isn't, Mike. We got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line. We'll come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Mike Nash from PrivacyCase.com. And, Mike, before I hand it back to you, I remember that one of the other reasons we were all encouraged to go to the new digital cell phone standard was because in the days of the original analog, anybody with a scanner could basically hear your conversations, and there was a lot of concern about privacy with some justification. But the original digital encryption that was part of the digital phone standard had a 16-bit encryption key, and it later came out that under pressure from the NSA, these were programmed so that the high order bits, the top 8 bits, were always set to 0 to make it possible to brute force the encryption key rapidly enough to listen to the majority of the phone calls. So even back then they were playing these nefarious games.
Well, I try to keep things in rose-colored glasses from time to time because otherwise it just gets too depressing.
Yes.
The smarter your phone, back when we're talking about all this part, one of the things that used to happen is people would clone phones. They'd point an antenna at it and steal the identification number off of it, then generate a new phone, and clone it. They basically took the profit out of the crime. They didn't really do much to beef up security. So your phone isn't that much more secure today than it was then. The scary part becomes when you start to realize how much information your phone actually stores now. It does way more than just star 1, 2, 3, 4, which was about as far as a bag phone would go back in the day. The more connectivity, the smarter your phone, the more at risk you are. As you had said before I came on, your phone isn't really off. It just goes into sleep mode. And I read a story about a woman up in Washington State, I believe it was. She was up in the Pacific Northwest. She had gotten into a car accident and ended up inverted upside down in her vehicle for a week. They located her phone by pinging it down to the closest tower. Now, I don't know whether she had battery power after that week. I don't know if she was diligently charging her phone so that it was powered up. In my mind, what that leads me to believe is your phone isn't much better than the security key cards you use, and they can at least locate you down to the tower even without a battery in it. It could be wrong. That's speculation. I'll be really clear about that. That's speculation. But your phone can power up off of 900 megahertz, just like the 900 megahertz chip inside the little key card that you use. And
now,
it has a much more powerful
know.
antenna.
That I did not know.
And it has it has a much more powerful antenna than the key card that you use. Now, again, it's speculation. I can't prove it. Don't hold me to it. But to see that and know that she was inverted for a week, and when the husband forced law enforcement to locate her, they pinged the tower that she was closest to and did a circular search from that tower. What that tells me is they couldn't do a triangulation, so there wasn't enough strings coming out of the phone, but they knew what tower she was closest to. And they began their searches from that tower, and they found her inverted off the road in a ditch. So, again, it's speculation. I don't know for sure. I don't want to make claims that there's hidden stuff and yada yada. What I do know is your phone can be compromised. Your phone can be compromised even when you believe it's turned off. These things essentially just go into a sleep mode where the screen doesn't light up. So all it is a matter of just turn on microphone, don't light up screen, and you'll never know you're being listened to.
Well, obviously, that's a great concern with all the NSA spying going on, and one of the areas that I'm worried about, of course, is the NSA has built in all these backdoors to Windows, to the Apple operating system, iOS 7, to our tablets and our smartphones, and sooner or later, real cyber criminals stumble onto that stuff, and they start exploiting it as well. So there really isn't much of a distinction between consumer-level cell phone spying and what the NSA is doing, because eventually that NSA technology does get out to the real cyber criminals, and they're going to use it. And you know, when you think about how much information you keep on your cell phone, a lot of people are keeping their banking passwords on there and things like that. And you know, I won't put my password file on my cell phone for that very, very reason. You know,
one of the things that I hear, we all talk about the NSA, and you know, I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to tempt the tiger, but you know, I'll trust they're doing things for the right reasons. At least that's what I'll say verbally. when granted, their original charter was not domestic. Well, I don't want to go there. Never mind. When you start to look at what's really going on, you really have to ask yourself, why is there this much interest in everybody? Why would anybody want to know what everybody's thinking? And you have to worry about mission creep. And what I mean by that is it might be at a quote-unquote federal level now, but what I've seen is the ACLU's filed lawsuits across the country because this isn't just the federal government that's doing this. They've found that it's local and state government as well that's using your cell phone to track and monitor what you're doing. So you have to start to think about, you know, is it going to be a situation where you get into a political debate with a friend of yours and all of a sudden you have problems? And I'm not saying next year, but 5 years from now. Or God forbid something goes way south and people start disagreeing with what's happening and they're listening to everybody. I mean, they're openly admitting that they're doing it. If on our last phone call, we talked about USAID 18 and how when William Binney came out, what they had discussed is that they can collect all the data that they want, and it isn't a violation of your rights to collect the data. It only starts to go into the gray area when they search the data. Well, if they can collect all the data that they want, who's to say they're not collecting everything you're doing all day, every day?
You know, I would disagree with that point of view. I would disagree with the point of view that collecting the data is not a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That's like a burglar coming into your home and stealing all your jewelry, but saying it isn't really a crime until he sells it and fences it. That's Mike, nonsensical.
I am not even going to argue with you about that. I agree with you that it's a violation, but USAID 18, the code that gives them their authorization, says that as long as they don't search the data, they're not actually looking at it, they're not violating your rights. They're just collecting it.
Well,
so, you can find that.
It's a wonderful fiction. I know it's a wonderful fiction,
I agree.
But, you know, again, the supreme law of this land is the Constitution, and they can write all the laws to say that it doesn't apply to them, and they certainly have already with all this torture going on of POWs and indefinite detention and NDA and the rest of it. They're clearly off the reservation, and this government has already proven time and time again they cannot be trusted with your personal business secrets. It is epidemic that the people at the NSA, they were spying on former lovers. We know that up at the Seattle APEC, U.S. intelligence agents were caught stealing business secrets from conference attendees. This government cannot be trusted with your private business information, and so you, the American people, must take responsibility. If you have information you don't want the government to have, your latest invention, your grandmother's secret chocolate chip cookie recipe, anything like that, you must take steps to make sure that it stays in your possession and your possession only.
I would take it a step further. If you're having any sort of conversations that may, in retrospect, later on down the road, be used to shine you in a light other than a beautiful light, either don't have your phone anywhere near you or get a privacy case and shove it in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the back of our packaging, we actually put the verbiage of the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution because whenever it's mentioned, they stop at the comma after whether or not it's a reasonable search or seizure. But if you actually read the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it goes into explicit detail on what must be done in order for your rights to be violated. And someone has to stand in front of a judge under oath, say what they expect to find and where they expect to find it before they can violate your privacy. And that's not being done. So as the argument stands that you put forth that it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, I totally agree with you.
Okay, one more time. One more time. What's your website?
PrivacyCase.com. If you enter coupon code WRH for What Really Happened, I'll give you 10% off if you order today.
All right. Thank you very much, Mike. We have to let you go and take a commercial break. We'll be back with more news stories after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And along with all of the emails about no plane at the Pentagon and chemtrails and HAARP and all the rest of that stuff just absolutely going away during the government shutdown, I'm noticing the corporate media is struggling for fill because all those government agencies that are handing out propaganda press releases every day, that's now shut down as well, except for the White House, obviously. And they're just corporate media is trying to find something to fill up the empty time. Fox News was just going on and on. Apparently, Britney Spears has a new rock video out, and they're scrambling for anything to fill up the gaps with right now. We're going to go to the phones here. Joe in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I had a question for you a while ago. I don't know how long ago that was. Many, many moons ago. You did a show on or a program, excuse me, on something about Mellanox software, is Israel's connection to software and Windows Server 8 and backdoors and things like that, and that just seemed like it disappeared off the Internet. I just happened to pull it down, and I have it on my own server, but it's like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a system analyst, been for 30 years, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. And, you know, you were just talking about the cell phones and the microprocessors and them having circuitry in there, you know, which could, you know, facilitate backdoors and things like that. I was just wondering if you knew anything more since you had originally, you know, talked about that issue.
Well, we know that Intel, a lot of Intel's R&D has now moved over to Israel. Israel takes these billions and trillions of dollars, and apparently they've gotten a lot more from Americans than we were previously aware, and they will use that money to come into the United States and buy up the best American companies, take them to Israel, and then proclaim they are technology leaders. And, you know, Intel does a lot of its R&D over there, which may have a bearing on this discovery that the latest generation of Intel processors have onboard 3G communication capability and a second processor with an isolated operating system. We know that Israel was working with the U.S. to develop some of these very dangerous malwares like Stuxnet, Dooku, Gauss, and Flame, that targeted various things like Iran's nuclear power station and may have been a contributing factor to the Fukushima meltdown. Others were targeted at banking systems in places like Iran and Syria. Israel has the highest per capita incidence of criminal computer hackers in the entire world, and so, yeah, there's definitely an Israeli dimension to all of this sneaking around and backdooring our systems.
Yeah, I mean, all one has to do is just do a search on it, and just amazing how much stuff comes about. All these different companies that are all based out of Israel, it's just it's mind-boggling, and I mean, I just don't know what to say. I'm at a loss for words. It's like, you know.
Well, it may explain why the U.S. government devotes so little resources to actually tracking down and finding criminal cyber hackers. Don't want to upset our friends in the Middle East. But, you know, it's like the U.S. has staked out the American computer user just to be a victim for, you know, predators that operate over the Internet with all these back doors and everything. We know that Israel... an Israeli company, Converse Infosys, got the contract to build wiretapping capability into America's hardline phone system. And during the Israeli spy scandal that broke about the same time as 9/11, it turned out Israel had left backdoors in that system, so that in addition to U.S. law enforcement being able to go in and listen to any phone just by typing the number into a keyboard, Israel was able to do exactly the same. And the scandal broke because all of a sudden American drug enforcement was finding that their raids against ecstasy dealers, who also tend to be predominantly Israeli, were coming to naught. That somehow the Israeli dealers knew when the raids were going to take place, where they were going to take place, and it turned out that these Israeli companies had hacked into the messengers, the pagers that the detectives were using back then, and just had an inside look at wherever the drug enforcement was going, and then they'd let these smugglers and dealers know, hey, you don't want to be here on this date at this time. And the whole thing blew up. It involved another company called Amdocs, which did all the phone billing processing for America's phone companies, which allowed Israel to have a map of who's calling who inside the United States of America. And this was all hushed up. There was that one 4-part series on Fox News by Carl Cameron, which included the admission that Israeli agents who were arrested on 9/11, the dancing Israelis, there was evidence that linked them to 9/11, but that evidence was now classified by the U.S. government. So it's like the U.S. government has declared open season on America for any Israelis operating over here. Every time they catch another Israeli spy, they just send him back to Israel. The last Israeli spy to actually go to jail was Jonathan Pollard, and they're already talking about letting him out.
Excuse me. Man, I'll tell you. I have a question for you. This whole thing with the government shutdown.
Yes.
Do you think it's any kind of a, I'm at a loss for the word, how can I say this? You know, Israel says, I want you to go over here and bomb Syria and do this, and, oh, well, we're not going to do that. Okay, we're shutting you down. Well, isn't it kind of like the other way around? Doesn't the U.S. give Israel money? I mean...
Oh, yeah. Huge amounts of money. In fact, I have an article here just about that. Apparently, and this was a story over at Christian Science Monitor, where an economist has gone back and calculated that since 1973, Israel has cost the United States about $1.6 trillion. That comes out to $5,700 per American citizen. And I used to have this little saying about how the American people have been forced to give Israel 4 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program. Well, that was only $24 billion. And so, going by the numbers coming out of the Christian Science Monitor, the American people have been forced to give Israel 60 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program. And for all that money, we've never gotten Giant Leap for Mankind or any tech boom here in the U.S. Israel's getting the tech boom.
Wow. I mean, you just gave me an idea on something else. I just want to ask you this question. Okay. There's a lot of rumors flying around out on the Internet, you know, whatever. But do you think that we presently have technology, whereas we are already on the moon and we are already on Mars, we are already mining or colonizing those areas?
No. Unfortunately, we sort of treated the moon. I mean, can you imagine Columbus coming to America, then he says, I found it, turned around, went back, and nobody ever followed up. The United States has lost its lead in space. It's lost its lead in so many other areas. And President Obama is the first president since Dwight D. Eisenhower to preside over a nation without a manned space program. And it's really a shame because our civilian space program was a technology incubator that gave rise to the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. And now we don't have that. All the money's going into the military to create these really, you know, boondoggle weapon systems, and any technology breakthroughs they get are kept from the American people somewhere between 10 and 20 years. And by the time it's finally allowed out, it's really not commercially worth much of anything at all. So it's just an absolute, complete disaster. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, yeah.
All right, Joe, I'm going to let you go because we got callers on the line here. I need to switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. I may have to keep you over the next commercial break, but what's on your mind?
Well, I talked to somebody who works on airplanes out in Houston, and already an Israeli company is courting these airlines to put in these anti-heat-seeking missile defense systems, like with flares, chaff, and all that stuff, to set out decoys, since those 10,000 heat-seeking missiles fell into Al-Qaeda's hands. And now Israel's trying to sell this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Israel to use a heat seeker to shoot down a civilian jet in order to boost sales.
And also, too, it's more like there's even talk about an Israeli security company replacing the TSA.
Oh, how wonderful that's going to be. And people need to remember, on 9/11, all of the airport gates through which our supposed terrorists passed through with their box cutters were being run by an Israeli security company.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say, Mike. I'll let you go into your commercial break.
All right, yeah, we're coming up on a commercial break. I know we got one more caller, and I'll be getting to him after the commercial break because we're down to these last few minutes here. Over in Syria, apparently the hired mercenaries, a.k.a. the rebels, have now declared it is legal for the rebels to steal anything belonging to Christians, Alawites, and Druze. Jewelry, TV, smartphones, whatever, so they can cash in and buy more weapons. That's not a popular revolution when you do things like that. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Back to the phones here. Tom in Texas. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, the furloughs here, it's hitting all of us pretty hard. But when I was wondering here, have you heard anything about, I heard Michelle had, 25 personal assistants, and no telling how many Obama himself had. And, of course, we got the dog walker and the CD changer and all these people working at what else. Did they get furloughed? Did they have to now
I have no idea.
On?
I have no idea, and I would not be surprised to find out most of them are still there waiting hand and foot on the First Lady, who, by the way, is not an official government position, I might add. The members of Congress who are still being paid during the shutdown, they're whining and complaining they're having to answer their own phones now in their office because their staffs have been put on furlough. So if you've ever wanted to call your Congress critter and give them a piece of your mind, now's the time to do it because apparently they're answering their own phones, or probably they're just letting them ring and go to voicemail.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they're all having to pay the price that, the average American out here has to be paying, Well, they're doing without like we are.
Again, the only parts of the government that were shut down are those parts that, we the people really wanted to have. NASA website, the national parks, national monuments, kind of stuff. And the parts of the government that we absolutely hate, NSA, TSA, Department of Homeland Security, they're still open for business. And it's a form of extortion. The government is saying if you want those things that you want to have, you're going to have to accept those things you don't like. And that's really what it's coming down to.
Well, I know that they're talking about people who are getting their money from the government, like vets who are on disability, and there's a lot of other. They're shutting down the people who cut down the checks.
Yeah, so I understand that the much long delayed refunds for the 2012 tax year are not going out while the shutdown is going on. I've been seeing all these stories all over the net about how due to computer problems and due to economic concerns that the tax refunds from 2012 have not been going out either. So, I mean, it's just a cash grab. That's all that's going on right now is they're grabbing as much money as they can. Remember this little slogan we have on a coffee cup over at our What Really Happened online store? The last official act of any government is to loot the nation, and that is what is going on right now before your very eyes.
Yeah, blatantly. Well, that's all I wanted to bring up, and thanks to you and Claire for all the good work y'all do.
All right,
have a good day.
Thank you very much. We will do our best. All righty, so we're in our last segment for the show, and I'm going to keep coming back to this because it is so important that we make this go viral, this simple question. Why is the U.S. government which is allowed to issue debt-free currency under the Constitution, borrowing currency at interest from a private central bank, condemning future generations of Americans to debt slavery. Why are they doing that? And that is the question we must ask. It is the question the government doesn't want us to ask. You're not seeing it anywhere. And all this talk about debt ceiling and rates and all, nobody is asking that question because they don't have an answer for it. They don't have an answer for it at all. Congress is selling future generations of Americans into the debt slavery of the private central bank because they get a piece of the action back as huge campaign donations every election cycle. Congress can rescind the charter of the Federal Reserve any time they want to. The President can order the Treasury to put debt-free money into circulation to serve the public interest. John F. Kennedy did it with Executive Order 11110. He put $4.5 billion of debt-free money into circulation. They were called United States notes. And they circulated through commerce without accruing interest to the privately owned Federal Reserve. 5 months later, he was assassinated. And on the Warren Commission sat John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, president of the World Bank. And I don't care how good a banker he is not qualified to be investigating the assassination of a president. So the only reason he was on that Warren Commission was to make sure the American people never realized the banker agenda behind his assassination, getting rid of those interest-free, debt-free United States notes. And as soon as Kennedy was dead, they were pulled from circulation on order of Lyndon Johnson and destroyed to throw us all back into the financial indentured servitude to the private central bank. So as you go about your business and you're talking with people about the debt ceiling and the impasse and the rest of it, just ask that question. Why is the U.S. federal government, which is authorized under the Constitution to create and issue debt-free currency, borrowing currency at interest from a privately owned central bank, thereby condemning future generations of Americans to debt slavery to those bankers, to work off and pay off that interest? And the debt problem is so severe that with all the taxes being collected, they can't even stay on top of the interest, let alone pay down the principal. Had the Federal Reserve been required to charge zero interest on that currency, the American taxpayer would have completely paid off the federal government debt just since Vietnam. But it is by design and by intention, with the complicity of Congress, that you be kept in a state of permanent debt servitude to private central bankers. It is a scam they have perpetrated for hundreds of years on nation after nation after nation, and now they're trying to complete their design and force this system on the rest of the world with American military force. That's what's going on. When you sift through all the distractions and propaganda and spin, it all comes back to all wars are bankers' wars. To conquer the world, to permanently enslave them to private central banking, to permanently enslave all of mankind to this system. And it has got to go. The common enemy of all mankind are these private central banks that plunge nations and their people into poverty and worse, into wars. These private central bankers have already historically demonstrated a willingness to send hundreds of millions of human beings to horrible death and disfigurement in order to keep the survivors of the wars enslaved to their little scam. We fought a revolution to be free of this kind of banking, only to be sold back into that slavery not once, but 3 separate times by our corruptible Congress and our corruptible presidents. And that is why when we talk about the blueprint for the new America, for the nation that will rise here when this one is finished in its death throes, rule number 1, no private central banks. Rule number 2, no private central banks. Rule number 3, no private central banks. And we have to decide that will be the economic form of our new nation, because when the economy implodes, which seems imminent, and drags down the current government with it, there'll be no end of carpetbaggers well funded by those private central bankers. out here trying to sell the same system. Oh, we'll just start that same system up all over again. There'll be all kinds of money coming out of the private central bank, and you won't have to worry about paying it back. That's your great-great-grandchildren's problem. And anybody who's out there trying to sell a restart of the private central banking scam needs to be tarred, feathered, hanged, drawn, quartered, burned, and the ashes peed on by a rabid dog. Because of globalism, it is entirely possible that all of these private central banks will be brought crashing down at the same time, and it will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restart human civilization free of slavery to the bankers. Please share this with everybody that you know. Your social media, your coworkers, your co-students, your friends, your family. That's the question that needs to be asked right now. Not arguments about Obamacare, not arguments about who's furloughed and who isn't. Why is the U.S. government, which is allowed by the Constitution to create and issue interest-free currency, borrowing currency at interest from a privately owned central bank, thereby condemning future generations of Americans to endless, hopeless debt slavery? That's the question. There's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay angry, stay informed, make good choices, ask the right questions. Please go over to Republic Broadcasting, hit that donate button. We don't get money from Monsanto or Big Pharma or Big Oil or any of those other places. We are the People's Radio Network. We need the people's support. Thank you very much for all of those who have supported us up to this point, and aloha, America.